So Chaya Sarah actually is known for different aspects of the different parashas. On one hand, in many communities, this coming week is Chevra Kadisha week, because Chaya Sarah talks about the mitzvah of burial, the great effort Avram went to make sure that Sarah got her burial, her own burial, and the whole concept of a Jewish cemetery and a Jewish funeral. That's one thing. In addition to that, we won't be discussing that tonight. But the second aspect is it's the parasha of Shidduchim, that we see the effort that Avram sent Eliezer to go find a wife for Rivka. So we'll focus on that for a little bit. The Torah tells us, "Vayivarechu as Rivka," and from there the Gemara in Ksubis learns out the mitzvah of Birkat Eresin, the bracha one makes. We'll see when the bracha one makes at a marriage ceremony. In fact, the Gemara in Sota tells us about based on the pasuk in Chumash, that when a man and woman get together in marriage, so it's really that it's building a bayis ne'eman, and it's bringing God into their lives. As the pasuk, as you have Isha and Ish, Aleph and Shin are the same, but then there's the Yud and the Hey, which is one of God's names. So how does one bring God in their life? They bring it in by getting married, union between a man and a woman. So one of the things we do so actually Bisman HaGemara, Bisman HaMishnah, you had different aspects. It didn't happen at one time. You had the Eresin, you had the Kedushin happening, and then later on, whether 12 months later, you were halachically married at Kedushin, but you didn't live together until the chuppah, which took place 12 months later. Today our minhag is that we have both the Kedushin and the chuppah happening at the same time. Now first we do the Bereshis Eresin. The minhag is just to read the Ksuva. That's just to have a delay, not, to create an artificial hefsek. And then we go ahead, we do it the chuppah. But technically speaking, there's no need, you don't have to read the Ksuva. The rabbi could speak, or any other hefsek. That's just the minhag. So, but what we do is we make the Bereshis Eresin. So the rabbi, doesn't have to be the rabbi, but the one who's Mesadek Kedushin, usually the rabbi, makes the Boyer Priya Gafen. And afterwards we make a bracha which seems to have a strange text. It's not the classical bracha we make. We make the bracha that is normal, but then it's V'tzivano, so you get al mitzvahs kedushin, Kaddish as isha, but no, it says V'tzivano al harayas. He commanded us on the prohibitions of illicit relations with different people, but also on us arusos, even the arusa. Even after we do kedushin, you can't live with this woman. In fact, the Mefarshim say it's out of order. It should be kedushin v'chuppah. First kedushin comes, and then chuppah. So Rav Selevan, others explain that it's talking about historically, as the Rambam writes, that originally how did people, that's all there was. There's no concept of kedushin by Gentiles. You used to do chuppah. And then later on, when Chaya got the Torah, they also have the Kedushin, so therefore I did a chuppah the Kedushin. We're not talking about chronological order in terms of how you do it, but historically speaking, when Chazal set up the text of the bracha. So it's not the normal bracha, which leads the Mefarshim to ask, why not? Why don't we have a simple bracha, mitzvahs Kedushin, Kaddish as isha? We get into the whole machlokas al and la, depending on what you assume the mitzvah is. But why don't we have a classical bracha? So there are three basic categories of brachas. The classical, the first one is Birkas HaMitzvah. The classical bracha we make before we do a mitzvah. Usually, as the Gemara tells us, we make the brachas over lasiyasan. First we make the bracha, then we do the mitzvah. And that's what we do throughout, through sukkah, lulav, etc. Even though we have a text of al natilas lulav, because the Gemara says mida'ag be'nafikle, and therefore perhaps you fulfill your mitzvah once you pick it up. But just generally speaking, we make most of our brachas before. There are certain exceptions we make it after, like al natilas shadayim, because your hands are dirty. It's not appropriate to make a bracha when they're dirty, or the real classical one is al tfilas ger. that a Gentile can't make a bracha. So therefore, after the conversion, after you go out of the mikvah, then you can make the bracha. So the general rule is before, but we make brachas after and perhaps even in the middle as well. So so that's one level, that's the Berkas HaMitzvah. Then we have a second category, Berkas Shevach V'Hodah, a bracha on praising HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and on many things, whether it's lightning, thunder, perhaps Berkas HaMazon. And then you have a third level, which we do all the time, many times a day, Berkas Hanenin, the blessing we make before we eat, Shahako, Boer Priyadama, Hamotzi, Boer Priyagaf, and the whole works. So we have three general categories of brachas: Berkas HaMitzvah, Berkas HaShevach V'Hodah, and Berkas Hanenin. Where does the bracha of Erisons fit in? Door number 1, door number 2, or door number 3? So it's a major machlokas rishonim whether it fits under door number 1 or door number 2. Is it a classical Berkas HaMitzvah or is it a Berkas Shevach V'Hodah? What is the issue dependent on? Because we have to go back to a more fundamental question. Obviously, as we said, you make a bracha on a mitzvah. The first fundamental question is Kiddushin a mitzvah. What do you mean is Kiddushin a mitzvah? So we have a pasuk in the Chumash later on in Sefer Dvarim, Ki yikach ish isha, when a man takes, so ki yikach, when a man takes a woman. And in fact, that's what the commentators point out, that there's an interesting minhag among Ashkenaz. Normally when we do a mitzvah, we do the chinuch beforehand, but at 13 you become chayev in mitzvah. So therefore at 13 you practice a little before you put on tefillin, but you become chayev in mitzvahs when you become bar bas mitzvah. So it's interesting, the minhag Ashkenaz, when it comes to the mitzvah of tzitzis, so the mitzvahs of talis katan we do all the time, but talis gadol is only, the minhag is not until you get married. So where does that come from? Where does that minhag come from? So many point out that it's based on the juxtaposition of the pasuk. Ki yikach ish isha is right next to the mitzvah of gedilim taselach. So from the juxtaposition of the mitzvah of tzitzis to the mitzvah of marriage, the minhag developed not to put on a talis gadol until you're married. Let me just point out that back in the day they used to get married a lot earlier. In fact, I think there's some shaila in the poskim who gets kadima, like the bar mitzvah boy or the chassan. Basically, in terms of it was a case where, it was a chassan and a bar mitzvah, close to one another. So perhaps, I'm not sure what the minhag is, and if you don't, the question is, let's say you don't get married to 50, so do you? I'm not sure what the minhag is. There probably is no minhag per se. There's no problem for one to put on a talis if you want to anyway, but the minhag, the minhag of Ashkenaz is to wait. So that's the Berkas HaMitzvah, and then we have the Berkas Shevach V'Hodah. So we pointed out is a fundamental question: is Kiddushin a mitzvah? Because it's a pasuk in the Chumash. So is the Torah telling me ki yikach that you have to, or if it happens? So that seems to be a machlokas, the Rambam versus the Rush. The Rambam writes, one makes a bracha on Kiddushin, on the mitzvah of Kiddushin, and he writes, Kishem shemavarach, this like by every other mitzvah, you make the bracha first, then you do the mitzvah. So too, Berkas Erison is the same way. It's a classical Berkas HaMitzvah, and therefore first you make the bracha, and then you do the Kiddushin. That's the sheet. So the Rambam is clear, Kiddushin is a mitzvah. On the other hand, the Rush, in fact that's the Rush's Kashan Ksuvis. If Kiddushin is a mitzvah, we should have just made the classical bracha, Kaddish Isha, al mitzvahs Kiddushin. What's this whole thing? V'tzivanu al arayis, v'hitir, what is the chuppah, the Kiddushin, what's going on? Elavaden, the Rush writes, no, there is no mitzvah of Kiddushin. The mitzvah is pru uravu. The mitzvah is to have children. And Kiddushin is the heichatim, in order to be able to fulfill, halachically speaking, non-halachically speaking, you don't have to get married. In fact, perhaps even adultery would work. That's the whole Ramah, Minchas Chinuch, whether one can fulfill them. No one's recommending it, but post facto, if you committed adultery and you had a boy and a girl, or one and you had another with your own wife, would you get the mitzvah of pruavu? So that's a separate discussion, but to do it through the halachic means, that's the hechet timsa, you have to get married, but not that there's no mitzvah per se of marriage. One of the main purposes of marriage is to have children. So it's a machlokes, the Rambam and the Rush, on whether kedushin, will have to answer up, perhaps tonight, perhaps not. Then why is it, if you hold it's a Bereshis HaMitzvah, why don't we have the classical text? The Rambam will have to answer, why do we have this non-normative text? So either way, it's a major machlokes, Rambam and the Rush, on whether Bereshis Eristin is a Bereshis HaMitzvah, like the Rambam writes, or is it a Bereshis Shevach Voda? My nafkamina. Either way, at every wedding we're gonna have the Bereshis Eristin. What's the difference? If you say it's a Bereshis HaMitzvah, so perhaps a nafkamina. Number one nafkamina is, when do you make the bracha? According to the Rambam, it's a Bereshis HaMitzvah, so you go with the general cloud, and you make it beforehand. According to the Rush, that it's a Bereshis Shevach Voda, perhaps it's more appropriate to make it afterwards. On the institution of marriage, you make it so after you do the kedushin. So that would be one nafkamina if you have to make it before. Perhaps another nafkamina would be as well as on who makes the bracha. Our meaning is the Messiah kedushin makes it, but that could be also this like we have an original concept. It used to be when a person got called up to lane. So it used to be when you got called up for an aliyah. It wasn't a free lunch, you had to go lane. And until Chazal picked up on that, people were not showing up in show anymore or walking out right before the Aliyah, so therefore they instituted a designated reader, Baal Koreh, that he reads for everybody. And therefore when you get the bracha, really you're laning, but yeah, so too, the discussion here that perhaps really the chassan, in other words, according to the Rush, anyone can make the bracha. It's a bracha at the Bereshis Shevach Voda, on the institution of marriage. According to the Rambam, why isn't the chassan making it? So that's again not to the mavayish, the eino baki. That's a bigger, because over here it's a difficult bracha to make. So therefore, it's no kasha. Really, you could say the mitzvahs on the chassan, except that not to embarrass the chassanim who can't read. So therefore, Chazal say let the Messiah kedushin do it. And as well, and that would fit in as well as who has to drink from the cup. If it's a Bereshis HaMitzvah, so therefore, obviously, it should apply, the chassan and kala should have to drink. If it's a Bereshis Shevach Voda, so perhaps, not. So the meaning is that the classical custom is actually that the rabbi makes the Bereshis Eristin and he gives to the chassan and kala to drink. But the minig of bris, the Rav Chaim and the Salvation Tzavachumra, many have adopted it, that what the rabbi does, he spills a little wine out, and then he drinks a little wine also before he gives it. But pashtus, even it's not a Bereshis Hanenin, so it's not an issue. It's a Bereshis HaMitzvah, and therefore it's okay. Just like the minig is, when you have a Sheva brachas, there's a whole discussion. So we know, what do you do when you have a Sheva brachas after a wedding? You have 7 brachas. The one benches makes the boy Pri Jun, and then, the one benches he makes the boy Pri Jun at the end. You have just 6 brachas, and then you make a boy Pri Jun at the end. So the shayla is, what happens if you have a Sheva brachas and Shalosh Shudas? So what's the problem? So do Sheva brachas. The problem is, usually the minig is that the wine that you have at the benching, you say for Havdalah. So what do you do here? So again, the different minhagim, but one practice is, and that's the way we did this past week, is that you do everything the same. But so what do you normally do? The one who makes the Bereshis Hamazon, different minhagim, but he drinks from his cup, and then you pour out. You mix both cups and you give it to the chassan and kala, however you're going to do it. So some bring down that is you leave the cup for Bereshis The cup on Bereshis Hamazon you don't touch, you save it for the Havdalah, and then you just give it to the Chassan and Kala to drink. How could you make a Boer Pri Hagafen and someone else drink? So that's, since the Boer Pri Hagafen takes on the status of a Bereshis HaMitzvah. It's not just because normally we play Bereshis and I can't make a Boer Pri Hagafen without me drinking, or any brachas. However, over here, since it takes on the status of a Bereshis HaMitzvah, so therefore that's why it's okay. So that's similarly here. So they point out that would be perhaps another that'd be another nafkamina. So that's the shita of the Rambam and the Rush. The Rush holds it's a Bereshis. Rambam holds the Bereshis HaMitzvah. Hence we make the bracha first, and then we do the kedushin. And according to the Rush, you could do the kedushin, make the bracha after. And with shitason, the Rambam who holds it's a Bereshis HaMitzvah, you make it over l'asiyason. The Rush who holds it's a Bereshis Shevel, you make it after. It's an interesting shita of the Ravid. He seems to take a little of both. The Ravid writes, the Ravid says, it's a Bereshis HaMitzvah, like, he agrees with the Rambam that it's a Bereshis HaMitzvah, yet he says you make the bracha after the Kedushin. So, which one is it? So Bishlom of the Rambam consistent, the Rush is consistent. What's pshat in the Ravid? If it's a classical Bereshis HaMitzvah, then why does the Ravid say you make the bracha achal asiyasim? So the Ravid sheet is as follows, is that, and it works together with the Tshuvas HaRashba, but the Ravid sheet is as follows, that when, normally speaking, a Bereshis HaMitzvah you make over l'asiyasan. However, any mitzvah which is tali b'das acherim, we don't make until afterwards. In other words, because chashash bracha l'batala, or perhaps more than that, is that what's going to happen? I'll make the Bereshis Erisin, and the wife will say, "Sorry, I'm not interested," or not the wife. Yes, she said, "I don't want to become your wife. I don't want to become the kala," and therefore you make it to be a bracha l'batala. So since it's totally, even though normally a Bereshis mitzvah goes before, but if it's totally in someone else, we hold off on the bracha until afterwards. It's similar to the Rashba Shita by tzedakah, the famous kasha in the Tshuvas HaRashba. Why don't we make a bracha on Bereshis? Why don't we make a bracha on tzedakah? If we make a bracha on mitzvahs d'oraisa, mitzvahs d'rabbanan, even hagam, and tzedakah is a mitzvah d'oraisa, why don't we make a bracha before we give tzedakah? So that's the whole share in its own right, but why not? To the Rashi writes, because it's totally b'das acherim. Maybe the ani is not going to accept it, and therefore it will be a bracha l'batola. It's a whole discussion in the Rashi whether the issue is bracha l'batola or it's more fundamental. Forget it, even without the bracha l'batola, if it's a mitzvah which is dependent on someone else, Chazal never instituted a bracha. That's a whole discussion is within the Rashba. But clearly the Rashba is the same, similar, on a general level it's a similar idea. If it's totally b'das acherim, you don't make up. So therefore, the Ravid agrees with the Rambam, it's a Bereshis HaMitzvah. So why make it afterwards? Make it afterwards because it's totally b'das acherim. We have to explain then, how come? So that makes sense. So why not by tzedakah? So why wouldn't the Rashba say then by tzedakah, like the Ravid? Okay, you're right. That's part of the right. If the whole issue is bracha l'batola, to wait until afterwards, and which is a separate share we'll have to get into. Can you make a bracha afterwards? So maybe we'll continue on that. But to summarize, we have a machokes, the Rambam, the Rush, and the Ravid, whether it's a Bereshis HaMitzvah or Bereshis Shevel Gadol when you make it. Halach l'maisa, how do we paskin? We paskin like the Rambam, that we make the rabbi makes the bracha, the Masada Kedusha makes the bracha, and then we do the Haraya Mekudesh, we do the Kedushin afterwards, and we'll continue more on how do we reconcile the Ravid with the Rashba, and in terms of making, is that, are you permitted to make a bracha, after the mitzvah? The Torah tells us about the mitzvah of kvura. Kavar tikbareno bayomahu, and in Parashas Chaya, the Torah goes into great detail how important it was for Avram to designate to have a special Jewish cemetery. So what is the reason behind the nature of the mitzvah of kvura? What is the basis that is, and according to the Ramban, the mitzvah of kvura is only a chiyuv on Jews and not goyim? What is the reason for that? There's a concept the Gemara Megillah tells us, as well as other chazals, that there are different levels of kedusha. There's something which is gufei HaKedusha, that's the Sefer Torah Tefillah Mezuzah. There's something called Tashmishe Kedusha, the manto on a Sefer Torah, something touching the Torah, something touching the Guf HaKedusha. Perhaps it's a whole discussion regarding a tefillin bag, because Rashi, because what's actually touching the tefillin bag? Just the ritzuas. So the question is, the letters on the ritzuas, is that considered Guf HaKedusha or Tashmisha Kedusha? So Rashi learns it's actually Guf HaKedusha, and therefore when the tefillin bag touches it, it's Tashmisha Kedusha, so Nikvarim. Tosas says, no, it's only Tashmisha Kedusha, and therefore the bag would be a Tashmish to Tashmish. Therefore you wouldn't need to bury it. The minig is we're machmir like Rashi. So there's Tashmisha Kedusha, something which comes in contact with the Kedusha. And then there's Tashmisha Mitzvah. Let's say, so Lulav, Kol Zman you're using the Dalin Minim, so it has Kedusha. La'achar mitzvasam nigvaram, nizrakim. After you finish using it, it's no longer in Kedusha, you can throw it out. So so that's what the Gemara tells us. Tashmishe Kedusha nigvarim, Tashmishe mitzvah nizrakim. Let's say, so if you have a lulav or you have a shofar, so after it's used, you can wrap it up and throw it out in the garbage. You should do it derech kavod, as the Rashba says, in a separate bag, separate box, but strictly speaking, it's not chayav in kfura. So the Gemara never gives us the reason for that halacha. Why is it Tashmishe Kedusha Nikvarim and Tashmishe Mitzvah? No. So the Rav Chaim Volozhin explained to the Nefesh HaChaim that where does a Jew get its Kedusha from? We have, a non-Jew has 7 mitzvahs, and we have 613, but that's not the difference, that we have more mitzvahs, they have less mitzvahs, that a Jew is chayiv in Talmud Torah. We have Talmud Torah. So the Gemara, and that's why he explains the Gemara in Nida to them, what about Jews that don't learn? The Malach teaches every Jew Kol Torah Kulo before they come out, and therefore, then when they get hit on the way out, they forget everything. It can't be they forget everything. There must be some type of residue. Or the fact is that now the body becomes a Tashmishe Kedusha. So therefore, Nikvarim. And therefore, that's the klal. The klal of Chaim Volozhin says anything which has Torah, the Torah creates the Kedusha. So therefore, Tashmishe Kedusha, something which comes in contact with Tefillin, Torah, Tefillin, Mezuzah, Sefer Torah, so therefore, Tikvarim. But if it's just a mitzvah, it's important to do Lulav, Sukkah, all the other mitzvahs, Shofar, but they don't have Kedusha. So Rav Soloveitchik asks, so what about, we always talk about Kedusha's Beis HaMikdash, the sanctity of the temple. Where's the Torah in the Beis HaMikdash? They wrote Torah on the walls. Like, where do we find Torah in the Beis HaMikdash? So Rav Soloveitchik explained, because what is the whole Mishkan called the Mishkan HaEdus, that was the Aron HaBris with the Luchos, that gave it its Kedusha. The whole Kedusha of the Mishkan was based on the Luchos, and the Beis HaMikdash as well. Alright, so what about Bayis Sheni? We didn't have the Luchos in the Bayis Sheni, so you're telling me there was no Kedusha Beis HaMikdash for during Bayis Sheni? So no, the Rambam writes based on the Gemara in Yuma that Shlomo HaMelech built Minavua, he built a vault underneath the Beis HaMikdash to store the Luchos down in the basement. There's a whole historical machlokas about what exactly happened there. So why is the Rambam telling me a history lesson? He paskins that the Luchos were under the base, or in the basement of the Beis HaMikdash. So Rav Salvation explains, because the Rambam is telling me a halachic issue, that if there wasn't no Luchos, there wouldn't be any Kedusha to the Beis HaMikdash, to the Bayis Sheni. And therefore, how does the Bayis Sheni get its Kedusha? That's what Rav Salvation explains. It gets the Kedusha through the Luchos. So what about Kedusha's Beis HaKnesses? Where does the shul get its sanctity from? So the Rambam writes in Hilchos Tefillah that really the only shul that gets a Kedusha's Beis HaKnesses, that's only a shul which is miyuchad. It has an Aron Kodesh, has a Sefer Torah and an Aron Kodesh. Certain places would just come in when you need a lady and you bring a Torah and it never stays there. That doesn't get Kedushas. The real Kedushas Beis HaKnesses is only if you have a Sefer Torah. A Sefer Torah which is miyuchad for that room. So we see, even the Beis HaKnesses gets its Kedusha from... Even the Beis HaKnesses gets its Kedusha from the Torah, from the Sefer Torah. So what about Kedushas Eretz Yisrael? Where does Kedushas Eretz Yisrael come from? There are no psukim on the ground. So that's what Rav Soloveitchik said, that who won the war? So we all know what happened when there were 14 years. Sheva Shekivshu V'Sheva Shechilku. The 7 years that the Jews during the time of Yoshua conquered the land, and the 7 years afterwards they split it up among the Shvatim. So who won the war? Yoshua, the Israeli army? So Rav Soloveitchik said no. It was the Aron HaBris. That's what the Medrash tells us was leading the way, knocking off the army. And therefore it was the Torah that's Makar. Again, it's the Mishkan HaEdus, it's the Aron HaBris that brought us into Eretz Yisrael, and therefore that gave it Kedusha. But do we know that the Machlokas in the Gemara about whether Kedusha Rishona was only temporary or was it permanent? Was it L'shaiso L'asid Lavo? So that's a discussion. But we paskin, the Rambam paskin, Kedusha Rishona was Bato, and therefore we needed a Kedusha Shniya. So what happened during Kedusha Shniya? There was no kibush. So how was Kedusha Shniya originated? Where did we get its Kedusha from? There was no Aaron. That's what the Rav suggested. That was the time. We have, different historical machokis, but we assume the Nes Purim happened before Bayis Sheni. So right around the time of Bayis Sheni, it was the Kabbalah of Torah Sheba'al Peh, that Torah tells us, the Medrash Tanchuma tells us, that the Kasha that says Nasa v'Nishma, the Jewish people willfully accepted the Torah in Har Sinai. Yet the Gemara tells us in Shabbos and Av Peches, Kol V'Nalav Har Kegigas, God had to force them to accept the Torah. So which one is it? So were they forced to accept the Torah, or did they accept it on their own? So the Medrash Tanchuma says, Torah Shebeksav was easy, they were willing, Nasa v'Nishma. Torah Sheba'al Peh, they had to be forced into, they didn't want it. So it wasn't until later on, as the Gemara says, Mikan Boda Rabba Daraisa, if the Torah was accepted under duress, So it shouldn't be binding. So that's what the Gemara says. Kimu v'kiblu. Kimu mashe kiblu kfar. They accepted what was given before. The Jewish people re-accepted the Torah Sheba'al Peh bi'ava. As the Mefarshim say, they took on more mitzvahs. That was the raya that they wanted it. And therefore, so where did the Kedusha Shniya come from? Kedusha of Torah Sheba'al Peh. It was the Torah Sheba'al Peh during that time that started to blossom, and therefore that's how the land got its Kedusha of Kedusha Shniya. And in fact, that's what they point out, and that could be perhaps why that the Kedusha Rishona was only L'shaisa, but Kedusha Shniya was permanent, because Kedusha Shniya, that's the dynamic, that's the Torah Sheba'al Peh, that the Kedusha Shniya was being Mekadesh Al Peh, and you can't destroy the Torah Sheba'al Peh. And this is the Pshat in the Ramban. The Ramban writes the Chaya of Kfur is only for a Jew. So as Rav Chaim Shmulevitz explained, a Jew has Tashmishi Kedusha, while a non-Jew doesn't. In fact, and this is as well, there's a whole discussion, what happened to the Shivrei Luchos? So different opinions, whether everyone agrees they weren't thrown in the garbage or they weren't recycled. Either they were put into the Aron. A machlokas is whether they put into their own Aron or they put together with the other Luchos. So that's what the Binyan Tzion says, my nafkamina, a major nafkamina, in terms of, can you put a puzzle Sefer Torah in the Aron? If the Shivrei Luchos were put together with the Luchos, and we see they have the same level of Kedusha. As the Shivrei Luchos were in its own, that means they couldn't be put in the Ark, because Malam Rosh Marie, we paskin that the Shivrei Luchos were together with the Luchos, and we paskin you can put a puzzle Sefer Torah back in, because we assume it has the same level of Kedusha, even though it might not be kosher for a Sefer Torah, but it has the same level of Kedusha. That's the yesod of Kfura, that Kfura is based on Kedusha. So we went through, we explained there's the concept of Tashmishe Kedusha, Tashmishe Mitzvah. Rav Chaim Volozhin said Kedusha always stems from Torah, and that's why he explains, that's how every Jew, the Malach taught them Torah, so every Jew has Torah, therefore a chiyuv of Kfura, because they're Kadosh, because Tashmishe Kedusha Nikvarim, and the Kedusha is based on Mikdash, was through the Mishkan, the Mishkan Ha'edus. It's also about Torah. What about the Bayusheni? There was no Luchos, so that's why the Rambam writes they were in the vault underneath from Shlomo Melech, because in order for Kedusha Shir to have Kedusha, it had to have Torah. What about Kedusha's Beis HaKnesses? Because the Rambam writes, Kedusha's Beis Knesses only comes when you have a Sefer Torah, someplace which is miyuchad for it. What about Eretz Yisrael? So it was the Israeli army who conquered Sheva Shekiv. So it was led by the Aaron HaBris, and therefore the Aaron gave it to Kedusha. So what about Kedusha Shniya? Because Kedusha Rishona was Nispatla. So what about, how did they were Makadesh at the second time to Ezra? So that was during the time of Ezra when the Torah Sheba'al Peh started to blossom. They were Makadesh it through Torah Sheba'al Peh. And that's why, as the Gemara says, originally they only were forced into it, the Medrash says, but Kimo V'Kimo, they accepted the Torah Sheba'al Peh B'Ava. And perhaps that's why as well the Kedusha Shtiya remained, because the Torah Sheba'al Peh perhaps even on a higher level. And that's what the Rambam, so that's how Rav Chaim Volozhin explains, that's the reason for a Jew that is Chayiv in Kfura. That's why Avram was so careful to find his burial place for Sarah and everyone after, because every Yid is a Tashmishe Kedusha, and Tashmishe Kedusha is Nikvarim.